Welcome back to Piece of Us podcast. I'm your host today, Crystal, and I am so excited about our guest that we have today. So I have Erin sitting next to me,
Hi guys, I'm Aaron.
and our guest is incredible. She is her story. She has gone through so much, and she has turned her heartache into helping others. And it's something that's amazing. And I was so just impressed with her story that we actually had her come out and do a family meeting with all of our kids and talk about her story and raise awareness because today is kind of a heavy topic, but our kids, I was shocked. Like after hearing her story and hearing all the different things she had to say, there were so many of my kids that came up to me afterwards that were like, "Can we talk?" And it was something that I'm like, "Oh, do I have my little kids in for this conversation?" And I was floored to hear that my third grader had gone through or had seen a situation involving this. So, welcome our guest today
This is
is,
Amy Neville.
Hi, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
and then next to her, of course, is our second host,
Max.
co-host, Max.
Oh, is my mic close enough? There we go.
Yeah, you're good.
I want to thank Amy for coming. I was deeply moved by her coming and talking on our family meeting that we had, and it was extremely eye-opening. I had known there were some issues, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, I think what you're doing is hugely important.
Thank you.
And for me as a parent, I really want to thank you for what you're doing and thank you for being here and talking with us.
This is definitely a topic that we need to talk to our kids about, guys. This is so important. Like out of all the podcasts we've done, this is the one that I've been most excited about because it literally saves lives.
Absolutely.
Okay, so going on to Amy, and Max is going to give our teenage perspective because
Oh,
he's
yeah,
gone through a few things in school and seen things that again you'll just be shocked by. It was so different when we were younger. But go ahead, Amy. Tell us a little bit about your story.
So I'll give you the abbreviated version. I could talk about Alex. He lived 14 years. I think I could talk about him at least that much. So Alex, my 14-year-old son Alexander, lost his life to fentanyl poisoning the summer of 2020. Alex was a very bright kid, very brilliant, super intense personality, felt things very deeply. He had a huge curiosity about the world around him. The first really big thing he got interested in was Egyptology when he was 3 years old. He could tell you everything about mummies and Egyptian religions and everything that was involved with that. And as he got older, that moved into Civil War, World War II, skateboarding. And eventually he became curious about drugs. And his curiosity with drugs actually, and he's kind of an exception in this aspect, but he became interested in first grade. So that first drug prevention week that happened at his school, he came home from that and was like, "Ooh, tell me more." Kind of like how you and I might hear about somebody's really exotic vacation and maybe it sounds interesting and we'd want to go. That was
Right.
his perspective on this. And he came home that day and asked us, "What does it mean to alter my mind and body? What happens?" He wanted to really understand what was going on. And so we knew at that point, okay, we're going to have some trouble down the road. We're going to have an experimental phase. We need to be ready as parents. And we learned everything we could throughout the years about teens and drugs and what could potentially happen. And as Alex got older, we had those conversations with him. The conversations grew more and more mature, very open. In fact, Alexander's biggest complaint about us as parents was the fact that he overshared with us. And of course, we took that as a win because we want to know everything we can about our kiddo as much as
Right. And you
possible.
think when they overshare, you're like, "Oh, I'm
Yeah.
doing something right," because they feel comfortable coming and talking to me.
Exactly. I did have to learn to ask him, am I listening to problem solve or am I listening to you just to let you vent, and figure out
Right.
where the communication goes after that. But so summer of 2020, we had this in June of 2020, this really weird period after for about 10 days where his intense personality was even more intense. He was sleeping at weird times of the day, having intense emotional outbursts. And I asked him, "What's going on? I want to take you to the doctor. Something's off." "No, Mom, I went to bed too late. I ate something bad." And of course, this is, peak puberty. It also looks like really intense puberty feelings.
Right.
And so After a few days of this, he finally says, okay, I got to talk to you guys. It was Father's Day that night, and he sat us down at the kitchen table, and he proceeded to tell us, this is the short version, but I wanted to try Oxy. I got it from a drug dealer on Snapchat. It has a hold on me, and I don't know why. And, at that time, the narrative was still very much somebody's taking grandma's pills and selling them to friends. So that's what we thought we were dealing with, right?
Right.
So the following morning, I called a treatment place. Alex actually came to us with a plan. He's like, here's where I want to go. Here's what I want to do. I want to be in by Wednesday. And we set the ball rolling on that. And so the treatment place needed to call me back that day, or they were going to call me back. We went about our business. We went and got haircuts. He and his dad went out to lunch, went and bought a bunch of candy. They came home. Alex went and delivered his packages up to the UPS store. He had a little eBay business at the time that was actually doing really well, selling off his childhood toys. That was kind of heartbreaking.
Aww.
I know, that was so hard. But it was working for him. He liked it. And then that late afternoon, he went out to see his friends because as far as we knew, he was going to go away to treatment on Wednesday, and he wanted to see everybody and say bye before he left. And sometime after 9 o'clock, about 9 o'clock that night, he came in. We said goodnight to him, and that was the last we saw him alive.
Oh my gosh.
It was sometime after 9 o'clock that night, he took the pill that took his life. Again, we had no idea about fentanyl and the depth of which these harms happen on social media. That following morning, I went to wake him for his orthodontist appointment, and it was too late. He just looked like he was sleeping on his beanbag chair on his floor. And, it's a sight I'll never forget. His dad immediately started CPR, and I called 911. Paramedics took him away, and the paramedics took him away, and we went to the hospital, but and they pronounced him dead at 9:59 a.m. that morning, and at 10:03 I got the phone call back from the treatment place. And yes, that part is very sad and very traumatic, but I also tell you that part about that few-minute difference there, because if you know anyone or suspect anyone might be experimenting, this is not the experimental phase of our childhoods. That's very different, and it's very, very deadly, and people need help immediately. Like, drop everything that you're doing and get that person help right now.
And I think that's a huge takeaway, because I can see how you're like, okay, well, I'm waiting for a treatment center to call me back. I'm waiting for what are my next steps. And, we had a daughter who was spiraling down and, dealing with depression and anxiety, and we could see it. And we're like, we're waiting for a treatment center to open up. We're waiting. And it's the scariest feeling in the entire world, because one day can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a scary thought to go through. And so I really appreciate your bravery on opening up about that and talking about this, because it really can save someone's life.
Absolutely. And we're driven by the fact that we were the parents who paid attention. We went to the drug presentations at school. We watched the videos. We listened to everything, but we didn't know about fentanyl, and how many other people out there do not know about fentanyl. And if that one little piece of information would have changed our life. And unfortunately, we learned the hard way. So
right. And he even came to you and said, hey, this is what I experimented with. This is what I'm doing. And so as a parent, you feel like, okay, I'm doing, like, he's opening up. I'm creating that conversation, and it just has a bigger hold. So what is the experimental part different nowadays than it was back when we were young?
So nowadays, these pills. So first of all, you're going to see, you might see a headline that says, college student dies from pill laced with fentanyl. That's actually not accurate. No pills are actually laced with. They're all counterfeited with. So no one's grinding up Oxy or Percocet, throwing fentanyl in, and repressing these pills. What's happening is they're just taking a binding powder, putting the fentanyl in the binding powder, mixing it up, and then pressing it to look like whatever pharmaceutical you can think of. Last spring there was a bust, and they found counterfeit Tylenols made with fentanyl. So It's
Oh
anything
my
and everything. Again,
gosh.
they are absolutely, I want to emphasize that they are counterfeit. They're not laced with. There's no such thing as a legitimate prescription in the black market. And they are just readily available and super duper cheap. Now, cocaine, methamphetamine, other drugs that are not a pill are actually being laced with it. So that the reason they're being laced with it is because fentanyl is so highly addictive that people get hooked very quickly. And so now someone who might have been taking meth before, now they're getting meth with fentanyl. Their addiction is that much stronger, and now they have to go back to that dealer more and more often to get drugs because they need to fill that fentanyl addiction.
I think that was my biggest. I didn't understand fentanyl. Like when I first started hearing about it, I was like, my question was, why would drug dealers want to kill their clientele? And
I
when you
get
came over, you explained they're not trying to kill their clientele, but the clientele they have, they're trying to get addicted to such a level that they're just spending so much money and becoming repeat customers. And so, in their mind, while some of their clientele may die, the clientele that remains are going to be coming back
Yep.
and increasing their profits.
Yep.
And that just blows my mind.
It is wild, and you know, and we're not just talking about people who are looking to get high. There's people out there who maybe they broke their arm. They knew they had Percocet or maybe an oxycodone when they had that broken arm, and now they're underinsured or don't have insurance. They have a really bad pain, back pain, whatever it is. They'll go out to the black market. They'll get on these social media apps, online, Craigslist, wherever, and seek out these drugs, thinking they're getting a real pharmaceutical pill.
So I guess that's the other thing is like the underinsured. I know you were telling us a story of a mom whose daughter had her wisdom teeth out.
Yep.
And again, it's not, I think a lot of people too classify it like, well, I'm not a drug addict.
And that's what we see. Like you were saying, weren't quite wrapping your mind around the fentanyl issue. It's because a lot of times, these news reports, there's information that you might hear out there, and a lot of people tune it out because, oh, we don't have a drug problem in our family.
That's how I felt.
And so then it doesn't mean anything to you. Those news reports and things really speak to those of us in the bubble, right? Because there's no education behind it. There's no time for an explanation in a 2 to 4 minute newscast. And what we need to start understanding is that this really is impacting everyone. People do not realize that this is an everybody problem. It's not one neighborhood versus another neighborhood. It's not rich or poor. It is everybody. It is impacting everybody.
Right. How much is too much fentanyl? Like, what is there a certain level?
You know, it takes 2 tiny grains of sand to kill somebody. To put that in perspective for you.
Oh my gosh.
So when they're making these pills, they have no idea how much is going into each one. And now pharmaceutical fentanyl that they use during surgery for end of life patients, that is, scientifically measured out and monitored by a doctor. So, that is one thing, but we're talking about the illicit fentanyl, and there's no safe dose. There's no safe amount. The pill that killed Alex took the one pill. He died from one pill that had enough fentanyl in it to kill 4 people. And he's not alone. I meet parents all the time. It was half a pill their kid took and they're gone. You just don't know what is in there.
Oh my gosh. I know one other one that you were telling me was there was a girl that was just at a party and she, again, wasn't doing drugs, wasn't doing anything bad at the party, but she had really bad period cramps. And she asked someone, does anyone have a Tylenol here? And
somebody gave her something for that pain and she's no longer with us. It's that simple. Like we don't think of it on that simple levels because we think people who die from drugs are long-term addiction and their addiction finally takes them and
it's an OD and this.
Exactly. But even those that are dying with those with substance use disorder that are dying, it's by design. They don't necessarily start out seeking fentanyl. They might be a long-term heroin user and heroin's becoming taken over by the fentanyl market. And now they get fentanyl and they're gone. They deserve that chance to recover. And with fentanyl, recovery is not like it used to be either. Recovery is hard. Let's admit it. Like we know heroin recovery, it's very hard. Any of it's very difficult. But throw fentanyl in and it becomes just exponentially more and more difficult to recover. Because with fentanyl, once you're addicted, dependency happens really fast. You build tolerance to it really quickly, and dependency, like I said, can happen really fast. And so once somebody's hooked, they're constantly they're taking multiple. I've met a lady in Colorado who is taking 75 pills a day. That's outrageous, but her body's built up that
Oh my
tolerance. So
gosh.
she never has a moment of clarity in her day to say, oh, today's the day I'm going to get my act together, because her brain is not her brain. She does not own her brain anymore. Fentanyl owns her brain.
Oh my gosh.
My goodness.
It's so sad. So, what are steps that we can do? Like, what, as parents, as a community, as, anybody watching or listening?
So, people always want to talk about, we need to enhance penalties for drug dealers. We need to schedule fentanyl. We need to close the borders. We could do all of those things, right? But we're still going to have drug dealers, and we're still going to have people looking for drugs. And, fentanyl is being made here in our own country these days too. So it's, I'll close the border now. It comes in through the ports, not the people seeking asylum, like a lot of people assume. But so it comes in through the ports. We're never going to end trade. So really, what can we do about that? Ultimately, I don't have an answer for that. But I do know that if we can get out and educate our communities, educate, one family at a time, if that's what it's going to take, that's what we have to do. People have to know about this, and they have to drop their stigmas. Whatever they think about drug use up until, 2015 needs to go away. They need to open up their mind and realize that this is an everybody problem, and that our country has a huge problem. We were talking about the numbers before we started talking here.
Yeah, let's talk about the numbers a little bit.
Yeah, so knowing Amy was coming, I decided to do a deep dive. Amy has a great website. Do you want to call that out real quick?
Sure. It's alexandernevillefoundation.org or anfhelp.org.
Excellent. So I went on her website and I was watching some of the content that she had and reading some of the stuff. And that led me over to the CDC's website. And it was interesting because Amy and I were talking before we went live, and I could only find 2020 information on the CDC website. And she said that, some of the reports have come out for 2021, and I'm sure the 2022 reports will eventually come out. But it blew my mind. So one of the things that blew my mind was in the United States in the year 1999, or I'm sorry, in the year 2019, there was 97,000 drug-related deaths in the United States. And in 2020, it had risen to 99,000. Now, you said you had heard the 2022 number?
2021, it's 107,000 drug deaths we had as a nation, and about almost 70% of that includes fentanyl in some way.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, wow.
So another number that I found on there, in the year 2020, the numbers that they did have, the Drug Enforcement Agency in the United States had confiscated through that year, just in the United States, enough fentanyl to give 379 million lethal doses.
It's outrageous.
That's every human in the United States. That's enough to kill every human in the United States. And now I'm hearing, I was watching TikTok or some sort of short the other day, and I heard about a drug bust in either 2021 or 2022. A single container on a cargo ship that was headed for the United States from China had, I think it was 52 tons of fentanyl in one cargo container. And the scary thing about that is when they stop and break it down to a lethal dose, that is 11 billion people. There's only 7 or 8 billion people in the world right now. So in that one cargo container, there was enough fentanyl to kill every person on the planet a couple of times over. It blows my mind.
It's really insane.
Yeah.
And, what's even scarier than that is that other drugs are on the horizon. We're already seeing something called ISOs showing up, and it's more deadly than fentanyl. There's this new dope trank that's showing up that contains fentanyl and an animal tranquilizer. It's more deadly than just fentanyl by itself. So
Oh my gosh.
there's no end in sight to the drug crisis in our country right now.
Oh my
So, one thing though that made a big impact, something that we now have in our household and something that I feel like should be in every household is, do we have it?
Yeah.
Did you pull it up here?
Here we go.
Okay, will you talk about this a little
Sure.
bit?
So, naloxone is really important. Everyone should have naloxone in their first aid kit. You might not need it in your house, but your neighbor might need it. You might be out at an event, public event, and somebody needs it. But what it is a medication that gets between the opioid receptor and the opioid and blocks that from landing on the brain and hopefully can reverse a poisoning or an overdose. However, it depends on how much is in the system. So you hit them with a spray or an injectable, and then you give it a few minutes, 2 minutes they recommend, but that's 2 minutes without oxygen to the brain. So kind of go with your gut on it. If they're not responding, you hit them with that second dose. Meanwhile, you've called 911 and you are hopefully administering CPR. So there's a few brands out there. There's a lot of different brands. Narcan is the most popular one that's out there. It was the first one on the market, and they carry a 4 milligram vial. We know it takes about 2 of those to save somebody. There's another brand out there called Cluxado that is an 8 milligram vial, and it comes in a pack of 2, and that's another spray. And then there's another one called Zimhigh. It's a 5 milligram injectable, almost like an EpiPen. It would work like that. So you have options out there. So the best naloxone to use is whatever naloxone you can get your hands on.
Right. So and what she's saying too is like if you are out at a public event, say you're at a concert and someone passes out, you can use this on
Yes.
them and possibly save their
Possibly save their life. And what we should know is, you want to look for signs. Are they turning blue? Like fingertips will turn blue, lips will turn blue. Obviously, they're not breathing, or maybe they're making a weird gurgling sound. You can give them a really hard sternum rub, and if they don't respond to any kind of stimuli, use it. The good thing is if you use it on somebody that doesn't need it, it will not hurt them. If your 5-year-old gets into it and somehow sprays it in their mouth, it will not hurt them. Your dog gets a hold of the box and chews the box open. It will not hurt them. So keep that in mind. It's better to be safe and maybe tick somebody off that you did something they didn't need than letting them die.
Right, right. Yeah, so like she said, this medicine won't hurt if you administer it and it wasn't a drug overdose or wasn't anything with fentanyl or that kind of thing. And so,
And it works on all opioids. So, your prescription opioids, but it is for opioids. So if it's something else, then you use it, again, always call 911. You really need medical intervention.
So now I can only speak to Arizona. So we live in Arizona. I got ours. It was around Halloween, and my buddy Joe came to me and he said, "Aaron, do you have this in your first aid kit? It's Halloween. There's been a ton of fentanyl busts recently, a lot of pills, and he had seen one where they had made some fentanyl pills that looked like Skittles." And I was like, oh my gosh, with Halloween coming up, our kids are, going door to door, getting candy from everywhere. I want to be ready. I want to be, safe. And so I went to the pharmacy, and I think ours was, so the pharmacist told me originally that it was going to be like $129 for the thing. And he's like, let me help you out. And so he did some stuff behind the counter, and he ended up only charging me, I think, $79. As far as we know, in Arizona, there is a pharmacist that has an open prescription.
Yes.
And if you walk into a pharmacy, you basically tell them your information, and they will give you this, no questions asked, over the counter. Does every state in the United States have that?
Most states do have that. You can, if you don't know where to go, you can type in where to get naloxone for free. There's some companies that will have you watch a quick training video, and then you $15 for shipping, and then they'll send it to you. In Arizona, the Substance Abuse Coalition Leaders of Arizona, there's community coalitions all over the place. So you can go to that website. It's saclaz.org, SACLAZ, is that right? SACLAZ.org. And click on a community coalition. Most of them have it, and you could ask them to get it from them. And you can also even, through your company or wherever, ask them to come and do a training to your staffs or your community.
That's really awesome.
that's amazing. So I definitely highly recommend put this in your first aid kit, guys. Put it in your purse as a mom going to different events and different things. Like, you need this.
One of the most creative things I've seen is somebody hole punch the corner of it and put it on their keychain.
I love
it's
that.
always there. It's not staying in the car because you don't want it to get too hot. So they've always got it on them.
I say there is one thing I read on our prescription. It says not to store in temperature over 77
Yes.
degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So,
So take it in and out. Throw it
and
in your
also be
bag.
careful of how much sunlight it gets. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, so on when it comes to schools, and kind of gonna ask Max this question really quick. What, so we came, well, we lived down here and in the Gilbert area, and we had seen a lot around our house, and then we had moved to a smaller town, and there wasn't a lot of drugs in the school there in St. John's. Do you agree with that? Like there
Yeah,
was.
I didn't see a ton when we were in St. John's.
Yeah, I felt like the teachers were like super involved and the parents were involved and sports were a big thing and it wasn't as big. I mean, it can happen anywhere obviously and it can be in small towns just as much, but it was we just weren't as aware of it in there. And then we moved down here to a really really big school and I was shocked.
I was too. It was crazy witnessing everything firsthand. Like you walk into the bathroom and then there's just a bunch of kids doing drugs in there and stuff. So that was always crazy to see. But I think the craziest experience I had in that school with drugs is when these two kids in the locker room did a drug deal right in front of the gym teacher, and it was just crazy. And then he was like, "Just do it outside, boys," as he walked past,
He
and I
didn't
was
Wow.
like,
stop it.
"Uh-uh."
Wow.
I feel like a lot, I mean, as teachers, they're going through so much, and there's only so much they can say without getting in trouble or this or getting backlash a lot. And so I feel like it's so hard, but it's so heartbreaking to see these kids going through it. And yeah, just take it outside as long as I don't see it.
Yeah, that's not okay.
Do the schools have the naloxone?
So I don't know about the specific area that we're in right now, but I know that the area where I live, they do have, they've come up with a policy and they're getting it into the schools. I know California just passed some bills to get it into schools. They actually have a law trying to be passed in California to get it into all schools, but most schools have been really proactive. In fact, I wasn't. This just popped in my head. The organization Facing Fentanyl. It's the National Fentanyl Prevention and Awareness Day that happens on August 21st. Last year was the first one. They have put together these naloxone kits that can be donated to schools. If somebody wanted to donate one to a school, they could go to facingfentanylnow.org and donate one to a school.
that's really cool.
That's really cool. So what are you doing? I know you're going to DC a little bit and you're raising so much awareness. I mean, she does, goes into schools and just really raising awareness about this topic. What are you trying to do there?
So, my biggest thing is education awareness. Everybody, we need to. Again, I would talk to every single kid in the United States if you would let me. If somebody would just let me into their schools. Some schools are really wonderful and embracing and let me do it. Maryland was really fabulous. Texas has been pretty good, and where Alex died has been obviously very open to having me come in. Most of the schools. It's interesting when I still get pushback, but slowly but surely it's happening. But as far as legislation goes, my primary focus are the social media harms. There's really no protections in place for kids online on platforms such as Snapchat, which is where Alex purchased this drug through. And we need to do that. I feel like as adults, I hear it all the time from parents. Well, kids are always on their phones. Okay, well, you know what? We let that happen. We believed all the shiny new social media. We believe in how it brings people together. And yes, I've seen the positive side of that, right? We're all in contact with people that we probably would never talk to, but it's nice to be able to see them, right? But for all of that greatness, there's just as much darkness on these platforms. And, it's if you look at the news reports, it's estimated. I estimate that at least 4 kids a day are dying from drugs purchased through Snapchat. Now, we're not talking about the extreme bullying, and we're not talking about the choking challenges, or we're not talking about the sexual exploitation, all the other harms that go along with that. I mean, drugs is just the tip of the iceberg, and it runs really, really deep. If it is illegal and it's happening offline, it's happening online too. So we would never let a drug dealer come into our corner coffee shop, right, and just sit in the corner and sell drugs. Well, that's essentially what's happening on Snapchat. Snapchat's the largest open air drug market, and we need to get better protections in place. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is, I get I'll get horrible emails after doing things like this about, oh, well, it's your fault for giving your child access. It's your fault for being a horrible parent, whatever it is, you name it. I've been told it. I typically, I don't read the comments. I don't read the emails. But the reality is these social media companies, again, going back to Snapchat because they're my favorite one to pick on, they have 90% of our 13 to 24-year-olds on their platform. That is the reason right there to do better for our kids,
Right.
and they need to be protected on these sites. And people come back and be like, yeah, well, there's parent protections, or, get the Bark app. Guess what? The Bark app doesn't work on Snapchat. They don't allow it, all in the name of privacy, right? So we have to be aware of what's happening on our kids' social media platforms. And if you look historically at our country, automobile, smoking industry, you name it, when they all had dangers, they dragged their feet in doing anything about it. What changed them was legislation. They, once they could be held accountable, they changed their ways. And that's what I'm really looking for when it comes to these social media companies and our kids.
Yeah.
How can our viewers help with that? Is there current legislation that's being voted on?
So we just ended a session, right? So everything will start picking back up again. The one that I'm really into right now is the Kids Online Safety Act. You could look it up. It provides duty of care. It provides third-party auditing. That's the one thing I really push for, is that third-party auditing, because these companies come out and they say, look at all these wonderful things that we're doing. Look at all this crime that we stopped from happening. But you know what? Nobody gets to verify that. We have to take their word for that. And at this point, so much has happened on their platforms that they've lost the right to police themselves. We cannot take their word for it anymore, because they're going to tell us whatever they can to make
Stay in
themselves look
business.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's just crazy to me that, like, I guess that it's come to this, because I feel like when we were younger, like, they're like, oh, it's just weed, or oh, it's just this. And then it turns into something else, and it turns into something else. And going through the foster care system and seeing the kids and hearing stories and just seeing firsthand how much drugs are destroying families and really just creating a divide and clouding the mind and like that kind of thing. And I feel like it's gotten worse. And
Yeah.
foster care, more and more kids are coming into the system. There's not enough foster homes out there. It's kind of something we raise awareness about is, foster care and adoption, because there's so many kids sitting in group homes and those kind of things. But it's just crazy that it's gotten so much worse. Are things more potent or more
So
different than back then? Or
there's
what's
a few contributing factors to all of this, right? One, as adults, we have favorable attitudes toward drugs because we turned out okay, and so therefore we kind of put that on our kids. We think, well, okay, fine, they're experimenting, but they're going to come out of it okay because I did. Well, what we're not understanding is the difference in the drug. So most every kid starts with marijuana. That is usually where it starts. And these days we're not talking about the hippy dippy marijuana that was like a 4% THC. These days we're talking about like a 50% THC in the marijuana that you smoke. And then if they're doing edibles, which a lot of kids are doing edibles, it's around an 80% THC. That's what's driving these ER visits for these kids. That's what's driving the suicide ideation. It's what's driving illness in our kids. So we have to be aware that this is not the same weed that you might have smoked when you were a kid. This is dangerous. It is, and it's killing our kids' frontal lobe. If you've got a kid that's smoking weed every single day, it is killing their frontal lobe. And when they're an adult, they are not going to be the bright, smart, functioning adult that they should have been because of this.
It's crazy that the THC is so much higher.
Well, it's been engineered. It's been engineered to do that. It's something that I learned along in this whole process and meeting with experts and learning everything that I can, is that the marijuana is the first medicine that's ever been voted in and not studied and regulated and then brought in by the FDA.
Oh, wow.
So weird.
It is so weird.
So, and I do want to make a little distinction really quick. So the difference between like buying it from a drug dealer or on the black market, that kind of thing, compared to buying it at like a dispensary.
So what you get at a dispensary should be clean, but there have been reports of these some dispensaries. I believe it was in Colorado was the big one, big bust where they were selling the counterfeit pills out of the dispensary. So in that case, you might have to worry about cross contamination. But in general, the dispensaries should have a clean product that they're selling you.
Okay. And we're not talking about the medical marijuana that's used in other things and that kind of things, or for medical use, right?
It's still just as strong.
It is still
Yeah,
just
it
as
is just
strong.
strong. Yep.
Okay.
It's all
That's
there's
really
there's
interesting.
no old school marijuana out there anymore.
It's just not a thing. It's crazy to me because so I've always been pretty against drugs, and I've always kind of like, just because I've seen it destroy families. It's, had to, in my own house, we've dealt with it growing up when I was a kid, my older siblings. But with it, when Aurora, our daughter, started having seizures, I was like, oh, and Aaron's like, we need to look into like CBD oil. And we made sure it didn't have THC. We used Charlotte's Web. Like it was I mean, I do feel that it helped with her seizures. And
100%.
so it's like at that point, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I giving my child drugs or am I being safe about it? Like I get so scared about all of that
It's such
kind
a
of
personal
stuff.
decision on that too. But as long as you're buying it from a reputable place, you should be fine. What happens a lot of times is people will go on and buy it. It's coming from another country, and so they don't know really what they're getting ultimately. Same thing with these online pharmacies. You'll see that you can get your prescription filled through this Canadian pharmacy. Well, if you go down the rabbit hole of that, you're going to realize it's not really a Canadian pharmacy. It's coming out of Africa or the Middle East somewhere. And again, you don't know what you're getting. You're getting counterfeit goods.
Oh my goodness. So, just on a personal question, did they ever catch the drug dealer that killed your son?
We know who it is. They did not. It is now a cold case with the DEA in Los Angeles. Alex is one of at least 4 people that I can direct back to this guy. But he is free. He is still a drug dealer, as far as I know. And fentanyl is the number one killer in the area that we lived of 12 to 17-year-olds in the area we lived. So, he's still doing his thing. It's not going to change.
Oh my gosh.
I really love the words that you said earlier. I think to start, we need to change the conversation. We need to, you know, we need to be able to talk about it freely. We need to understand that everybody has an opinion on this. Some people are going to be, more pro-drug. Some people are going to be more anti-drug. I think we all need to get together in the same room and we need to just start talking about this.
Absolutely.
And we need to figure out a way to come to the table and, get it so that everybody's opinions are being heard and that we're all moving together in this fight together.
Because that's the only way we're going to change this. It absolutely is. Again, it's that whole, well, my kid would never do that. The first time I heard that from somebody to me, I was like, well, okay, what is your perception of kids that do this? And I had to learn how to answer that a little bit more effectively. But it shocked me the first few times somebody said that to me.
And I think for me too, like in the beginning when you were coming out and you were going to talk to our whole family, again, I went back and like, okay, do I have my elementary kids sit in on this conversation? And I'm like, they're young, they're in 3rd grade, like everyone still likes everyone and runs around on the playground. Like you just think of your kids as so innocent at that age. And I was utterly shocked when 2 of my elementary kids, so my 3rd grader and my 6th grader, were like, hey, mom, like, I know one of my friends who has done this. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, okay, so what age should you start having that conversation?
I think you should start as soon as you can, especially once they're getting around other people and being in other people's homes, because you just never know what they're going to encounter. But of course, that conversation is going to look different at different ages. So with elementary school kids, I talk to them about body autonomy and how you have a choice, like healthy foods, what to put in your body, and then healthy medicines. Would you take something unknown and kind of take that route with them? With middle schoolers are the best, you guys. Like they will ask the questions. They don't have any preconceived ideas, and they will ask me all kinds of things, and they're really wonderful. And Alex was 14 when he died. He didn't even make it to high school, so it's we can't start too young. Like we've been talking about this since first grade. And then high schoolers, it's a little interesting because I can speak to a group of high schoolers and I can tell who's already been impacted because they're not making eye contact with me. They're turning their body away from me. They won't talk to me on the way out the door. So it's an interesting dynamic at each age group on how they respond to it.
It was for us too, just because we have all those different age groups. And so to hear what each one was saying, and my majority of my high schoolers said, I'm worried about this person.
Happens all the time.
And it seemed like everyone had someone that they knew personally, that they loved, that they cared about. And they're like, Mom, what do I do? And at first I was like, I don't know. Like, what do you know? It's so hard to even direct our kids when it comes to their interactions with their friends.
So what I try to arm the kids with when I leave them as we make these resource cards and I hopefully get the school to buy a bunch of them, not from me, I give them the template and they go print them and we give them out because your kid might not need the information on the back of their card, but their friend might pour their heart out to them and they don't know what to do for their friend, but they can be like, here's the suicide hotline. Here is the opioid crisis hotline. Here are resources for you. And then I always leave the teens with my information at the end of a presentation. And the number one thing I get is, and it crushes me every time, is what if my parents won't talk to me? And, we go down the list of like, okay, who else is in your life as an adult that you can talk to help them connect with somebody. But so many of these kids really feel alone, whether it's a perceived aloneness or really they are alone, they feel alone and they need to know where to turn to.
So what if someone is feeling alone and doesn't feel that they have anybody in their life they can talk to?
And if they're talking to a friend, like in your case, it sounds like hopefully they talk to a friend who can turn around and talk to their parents. We had that happen in a few times with Alexander, where his friend took a bottle of Advil. And Alex told us, and so my husband went right over to their house and was like, your kid just took a bottle of Advil. You need to go in his room and check on him. Like, something's going on. So hopefully they have other connections, right, in their life. School counselor, coach, whatever it might be. But again, like I tell these kids, like, we will find you help, but we have, if you are in danger, I have to bring an adult into this that's in your life. So, out of all your adults, who's your most trusted? And usually I haven't had one not come up with somebody yet. So
the hotlines are there though. For
the hotlines,
who
absolutely.
Don't have
They need
anybody.
to call the hotlines. The other thing too is, I don't know what it's called here. There's the see something, say something hotline. Is that what yours is called? Do you know?
I'm not 100%.
Okay, that's okay. So the perception from our youth on these anonymous reporting hotlines is that they're not truly anonymous. They are truly anonymous, but you need to know how to call and talk so you feel like you can get off the phone. So a lot of times you want to be respectful of adults. So let's say you call the hotline, you're going to stay on and start answering all of their questions. The next thing you know, you're uncomfortable, you're freaked out, you think you've probably told on somebody or identified yourself in this conversation. You can call these hotlines and say, this is exactly what I want to report. Here's the person, here's the problem. Hang up. You do not have to stay on that line and continue the conversation anymore. So you do what you're comfortable with and then let them take it from there.
I think more people would call if they did feel like it was anonymous or if they did, I feel like we teach our kids to be respectful to adults and answer all of our questions and do all of that.
So
but this is the one case where it's okay to just say what you have.
Shut it down. You can shut it down. It's okay.
Yeah. I feel like that's huge and that's so important.
And if again, after Alex died, we were very open right away about his death. We didn't know all the details of it, but we were very open because we knew his friends were probably up to the same thing, right? And we wanted everyone to know right away. And so after Alex died, his friends really felt this sense of personal responsibility because, they knew or they've done it themselves. And, it just happened to be, Alex happened to be the one that died. And gosh, they apologized to me and that is not their burden to bear. So we need to, if these kids are feeling this, they have to talk to somebody. There's a difference between being a snitch because your friend stole, a candy bar from the Circle K than telling that they have a problem where you can save their life.
Right. But like you said, it's not their burden as far as like caring if something happens and a child didn't say something, it's not on you. Like you didn't know, you probably doing it yourself or going through it or you didn't want to be a snitch, but in this kid situation, and it's something I tell my kids too, like it's not being a snitch. Like it's not that,
different.
that your brother hit your sister, like, or whatever, you know what I
Right.
mean, the kid's situation, but it's like, no, this is like a life or death conversation.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you need to get an adult involved that can help or can do something about it. And then watch what you're taking as far as if you are anywhere, unless you see a Tylenol come out of the Tylenol bottle, unless your mom or dad personally handed it to you, or whatever the case is, like know what you're putting in your body because it's super important. You don't know what's out there nowadays.
We don't. And something else I want your listeners to know is that I don't know if you guys know, but this country is facing an Adderall shortage, prescription Adderall shortage. We are predicted to be out of Adderall come March. So if your child or you, somebody you know is taking prescription Adderall, they need to come up with backup plans should you be a part of that shortage, because we don't want people turning
Yeah,
to the black
don't
market
turn
or
to the
trying to
black.
order their Adderall online or whatever it is, because you're not going to get the real thing, and it could kill you.
So, okay, then question about that. If you go online and you look, it looks like a reputable site. It says it's Adderall, like you're trying to order some. Is there certain sites? How do you know?
There is a website, I think it's called goodrx.com, that you can search. Another website I would recommend, I think that's the one, but if you go to Partnership for Safe Medicines, you can look on their site. It's safemedicines.org, and they have all kinds of resources on there, and we'll link you to that other website where you can search and see if the pharmacy you're looking for is or looking at is actually legitimate.
Okay. So yeah, definitely check the sites that you guys are on and all of that. Make sure that they are real. And I just really appreciate you coming out. We will put in the description a link to her website and her foundation that she has started. And we will also put some resources that if you are struggling or know someone who's struggling, please use these resources and please help, yeah, spread the word on this and open the conversation. Make sure you're getting Naloxone. Did I say it right? Naloxone.
Naloxone.
Naloxone in your first aid kits. And is there anything else you wanted to add?
That's pretty much it. Just keep an open mind, and let's spread the word. If you've listened to this today and you made it to the end, your job. You have a job now. You have to go tell 10 people about this.
Okay, I love that. That's a good challenge.
I really want to call out. So Amy was on a short film, I guess you can call it, and it is linked on her webpage. But I watched it last night. It's about 20 minutes long, and it goes over 4 different parents' stories of the situation that they went through. And it was just so well done, so moving. And I think if you've made it, like you said, to the end, go watch this, add this to your thing today, and then, go talk to somebody about it.
So speaking of the film, you can watch it with your family, and there is a guide on our website to help you kind of facilitate it and have conversations around it.
Excellent.
I love that. And definitely open that conversation with your kids. If you're a parent listening, go talk to your kids, see what they've heard and what they've been through. And I didn't know, that Max had seen a drug deal right in front of him. Like, you don't know these things until you start asking these questions, because a lot of our kids are too scared to come and like, hey, you won't believe what I saw at school today, or you won't believe what I'm, witnessed, or that kind of thing. And so definitely start the conversation. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on our Piece of Us podcast, and we will catch you guys next time.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Peace.
Peace.